The first light of dawn cut through the dense canopy of broken trees and abandoned buildings, casting long, eerie shadows across the wasteland. The world as it once was had crumbled, leaving behind a husk haunted by the restless dead. Cities were silent graveyards, streets lined with wrecked cars and debris. But amidst the ruin, life, fragile and fierce, persisted. Jacob stood on the edge of a crumbling rooftop, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. The wind tugged at his ragged coat, carrying faint sounds, groans and distant shuffles, that were all too familiar. Behind him, the remnants of what used to be a bustling town lay scattered, but it was no longer safe to call any place home. Zombies roamed freely now, their slow, relentless presence a constant threat. Jacob had seen the world fall apart piece by piece. The outbreak had come without warning, a virus that turned the living into mindless predators. Governments collapsed, and society's fabric tore apart overnight. But despite the horror, Jacob had learned one thing: survival depended on hope and the people you trusted. His fingers clenched the worn handle of a makeshift spear, a reminder that every moment could be a fight for life. He'd lost many friends along the way, swallowed by the darkness. But he wasn't alone now. Far from it. Nearby, a small group was gathering, survivors like him, each carrying their own scars, both visible and hidden. Among them was Elena, a resourceful and determined woman who had saved Jacob's life more than once. Her eyes burned with fierce determination, a quiet resolve that kept the group moving forward. Together, they had forged a fragile family in a world gone mad. "We need to move before the sun gets higher," Elena whispered urgently. "Zombies are more active in the open by midday. We can't afford to be caught out." Jacob nodded, pulling his jacket tighter around him. The temperature was dropping, and the chill seeped deep into his bones. "What's the plan?" "We head to the old safe zone," Elena replied. "It's not perfect, but it's better than here. We'll find supplies, maybe other survivors." The safe zone had once been a military base, fortified and protected before the fall. Now, it was a beacon of fragile hope, a place where survivors gathered, stories exchanged, and plans were made for rebuilding what was lost. The group assembled quickly. There was Marcus, the quiet sniper with unmatched aim, Sarah, a former medic who kept everyone patched up, and young Liam, whose youthful optimism was a rare light in the darkness. Together, they moved like shadows, slipping through back alleys and abandoned streets, careful to avoid drawing attention. Every step was measured. Every sound analyzed. The undead might be slow, but their numbers were overwhelming. One careless moment could mean the end. As they made their way through a deserted park, Jacob's heart thudded in his chest. Something was wrong. The usual groans were absent. Instead, there was an eerie silence, a stillness that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. "Elena," he whispered, "we're not alone." She glanced around sharply. "Spread out. Stay alert." They fanned out cautiously, eyes scanning the dense foliage and shattered playground equipment. Suddenly, a low growl ripped through the silence. A small pack of zombies emerged, their movements erratic but deadly. Jacob raised his spear, ready to strike. But before he could act, Marcus's rifle cracked, sending one creature crashing to the ground. The others shuffled forward, relentless, but the group moved with practiced precision, driving them back. "Keep moving," Elena urged, her voice calm but urgent. They pressed on, the encounter a grim reminder that safety was an illusion. Every moment was a battle, every breath a gift. Hours passed as they navigated the ruins, hunger gnawing at their insides but hope keeping them alive. The sun climbed higher, shadows shrinking as the heat grew intense. Sweat dripped down Jacob's face, mixing with dirt and grime. Then, as they rounded a corner, the safe zone came into view. Tall fences topped with barbed wire surrounded a cluster of buildings, guards patrolling vigilantly. It was a fortress in a sea of decay. Relief washed over Jacob, but it was tempered by caution. They were safe, for now. But the world beyond those walls remained a nightmare. Inside the gate, survivors bustled with activity. Some repaired barricades, others shared stories or scavenged for supplies. Jacob felt a flicker of something he hadn't in a long time: community. Elena led the group to a makeshift tent where the leader, a stern but fair man named Captain Reed, waited. His gaze was sharp, assessing each newcomer with a mix of suspicion and hope. "Who are you?" Reed asked, voice low. "We're survivors," Elena replied steadily. "Looking for shelter and allies." Reed nodded slowly. "We could use more people who know how to fight and stay alive. But trust is earned here." Jacob met Reed's gaze. "We understand. We want to help rebuild, not just survive." The captain studied them for a long moment before finally giving a curt nod. "Welcome to the safe zone. But remember, out there," he gestured toward the broken horizon, "the dead are always waiting." As night fell, the group gathered around a small fire inside the safe zone's walls. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows, reflecting the uncertain future ahead. Stories were shared, plans made, and for a moment, hope flickered brighter. Jacob stared into the fire, thinking about the journey ahead. The wasteland was unforgiving, filled with dangers seen and unseen. But he also thought about the people beside him, their courage, their will to fight. The world had ended, but their story was just beginning. The morning sun filtered weakly through a thick layer of gray clouds, casting a dull light over the safe zone's worn walls. The air was heavy, charged with a tense energy that never quite left the survivors living here. Jacob woke to the distant sounds of footsteps, boots hitting the ground, hushed conversations, and the occasional bark of a guard dog. Despite the false sense of security the fences gave, the dead were never far away. They lingered beyond the boundary, patient and waiting for any sign of weakness. Inside, the survivors moved carefully, knowing that the fragile peace could shatter at any moment. Jacob rubbed the sleep from his eyes and glanced around the tent. Elena was already awake, checking over the group's supplies with her usual sharp focus. Marcus sat near the tent flap, cleaning his rifle with methodical care, while Sarah tended to a small herb garden, an effort to keep sickness at bay. "You're up early," Jacob said, voice low. Elena looked up, her expression serious. "No time to waste. We need to get stronger if we want to survive here longer." Jacob nodded. "What's the plan for today?" Elena glanced toward the camp center, where Captain Reed was gathering people for a meeting. "Reed wants to organize patrols beyond the walls. We need to know what's out there, how bad things really are." The group packed what little they had left, water, food scraps, and weapons, preparing to face the unknown once again. Outside the safety of the walls, the world had changed. Roads that once bustled with cars were now cracked and overgrown, littered with abandoned belongings. Nature had begun reclaiming the land, with vines twisting through windows and trees growing through rooftops. But the creeping greenery masked deadly dangers. Jacob's heart tightened at the thought. Every trip beyond the walls meant risking everything. The camp's population was a mixture of hardened survivors and those still adjusting to this new reality. Many wore the weariness of endless struggle, their eyes reflecting lost hope. Others clung to determination like a lifeline. Captain Reed's voice rang out, commanding attention. "Listen up. Patrols will leave in pairs or small groups, moving cautiously. We don't want to draw more attention than necessary." Jacob caught Elena's eye. "You going on patrol?" She nodded. "We can't just hide here and hope for rescue. We have to take back some control." Their patrol group was small but experienced: Jacob, Elena, Marcus, and two others, Jenna, a scout with sharp instincts, and David, a former engineer who had become invaluable for repairing whatever technology remained. As they stepped beyond the gate, a cold wind cut through the morning chill. The fences behind them felt like a fragile promise of safety. Every footstep was careful, every sound amplified in the quiet. The streets outside were littered with the remnants of lives abruptly ended. Cars lay abandoned with doors ajar, storefronts were shattered, and flyers fluttered uselessly in the breeze. The silence was broken only by distant groans, the unmistakable sounds of the undead. They moved in a tight formation, eyes constantly scanning. Marcus took the rear, his rifle ready. Jenna led with nimble steps, eyes darting for signs of movement. David carried a small toolkit, prepared to rig traps or fix anything they might find useful. Suddenly, Jenna froze, her hand raised in a silent warning. Up ahead, shadows shifted behind a collapsed wall. Jacob's grip tightened on his spear. "Zombies," Jenna whispered, voice barely audible. "At least 5. Elena signaled to circle around, trying to avoid direct confrontation. But the undead were already stirring, alerted by the noise of their approach. The group moved quickly, but one zombie broke away, staggering toward them with slow but relentless steps. Jacob stepped forward, spear raised. The creature lunged, its movements clumsy yet terrifying in their determination. Jacob struck hard, driving the spear into the creature's side. It fell with a heavy thud, but the sound echoed, drawing more attention. "Run!" Elena shouted. They sprinted, adrenaline pushing their bodies as more zombies emerged from hiding spots, attracted by the noise. Marcus covered their retreat with steady shots, each bullet finding its mark. But the horde was growing, relentless in number. David stumbled over debris, twisting his ankle painfully. Without hesitation, Elena pulled him up. "We're almost there," she urged. The group pushed forward, desperate to reach the safety of the zone. Suddenly, a low growl came from behind. A massive zombie, larger and more aggressive than the others, blocked their path. Jacob's breath caught. This wasn't a mindless creature, it moved with intent. "Back to back," Elena ordered. They formed a tight circle, weapons ready. The creature charged, smashing into them with terrifying force. Jacob jabbed his spear, but the zombie barely flinched. It grabbed Elena's arm, its grip like iron. "Hold on!" Marcus yelled, firing a warning shot that made the creature loosen its grip. Elena twisted free, lunging with a knife. The creature reeled but didn't fall. The battle was brutal but silent, no screams, just the grunts of effort and the clash of survival. At last, the creature staggered and collapsed. Breathing heavily, the group limped back toward the safe zone, wounded but alive. Back inside the walls, medics rushed to help. Sarah cleaned and bandaged David's ankle, while others tended to minor scratches. Jacob looked around at the faces, tired, determined, and still fighting. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly. Elena nodded. "But we have each other. That's what counts." Outside, the shadows lengthened. The dead waited, but the living still had hope. And that hope was a weapon stronger than any spear or bullet. The safe zone was alive with uneasy energy as dusk crept across the horizon. Despite the temporary refuge the survivors had found behind the walls, a palpable tension lingered in the air, one born of countless close calls and the knowledge that the dead never truly slept. Jacob sat beside the flickering fire pit in the camp's center, the warm glow illuminating the worn faces around him. The events of the day weighed heavily on everyone, especially the encounter with the unusually strong zombie. It was a reminder that the world beyond was unpredictable and that danger could take many forms. Elena joined him quietly, settling next to him with a tired sigh. "That creature today, it wasn't like the others," she said softly. "I've never seen a zombie fight with that much purpose." Jacob nodded, feeling the same unease. "Do you think it's some kind of evolution? Something different?" Elena's eyes narrowed, thoughtful. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just a bad sign. Whatever it is, we need to be ready." Before Jacob could respond, the camp's calm was shattered by the sharp blast of a whistle and urgent voices echoing from the perimeter. Survivors scrambled to their feet, grabbing weapons and rushing toward the source. Captain Reed stood near the gate, his face grim. "We've spotted movement outside the walls, multiple groups of zombies heading this way. We have less than an hour before they reach us." The camp erupted into focused activity. Barricades were reinforced, makeshift alarms readied, and patrols doubled. Everyone knew what was at stake. A breach could mean disaster. Jacob joined Elena, Marcus, and the others as they prepared for the inevitable. The quiet moments before conflict always felt the worst, a heavy silence filled with anticipation. Elena checked her weapons one last time. We can't let them break through. If they do, this place won't survive. Jacob tightened his grip on his spear. Then we fight. Together. As the sun dipped below the skyline, the first groans echoed faintly in the distance. Shadows moved just beyond the fence, shapes that were no longer human but driven by hunger. The zombies advanced, slow but unstoppable. Their numbers swelled with every step, an unyielding tide of decay. Marcus took his position atop the guard tower, rifle trained on the incoming horde. Each shot was precise, thinning the crowd but unable to stop the flood. Jenna and David manned the gates, ready to close heavy metal barriers at a moment's notice. Sarah and other medics moved through the camp, prepared to tend to the wounded. The survivors formed defensive lines, their faces set with grim determination. Jacob and Elena stood shoulder to shoulder at the front, weapons ready. The first wave crashed against the barricades, zombie bodies piling up as the survivors pushed back with everything they had. Spears thrust, rifles fired, and makeshift traps sprung to life. But the dead kept coming. From the shadows emerged the large zombie Jacob had faced earlier. It moved with terrifying strength, breaking through barriers and scattering survivors. Jacob lunged forward, engaging the creature in a desperate struggle. Each strike was met with brutal force, but he refused to yield. Elena provided cover, picking off the smaller zombies swarming around. Despite their efforts, the creature advanced, and for a moment, Jacob feared it would overwhelm them all. Suddenly, a loud crash sounded from the far side of the camp, part of the fence gave way. Alarm bells rang out as a second group of zombies poured in. Panic threatened to break the lines, but Captain Reed's booming voice rallied the survivors. Hold your ground. Don't let fear win. The battle grew chaotic, but amid the chaos, Jacob spotted a small group attempting to sneak through a weak spot in the wall. Here, he shouted, signaling Elena. They intercepted the intruders, turning a potential disaster into a fight they could control. As the night wore on, the survivors pushed back the relentless dead, their exhaustion mounting but their resolve unbroken. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to brighten the sky, the zombie horde retreated beyond the walls, leaving behind a battlefield strewn with fallen creatures and weary fighters. The safe zone had survived, but just barely. Jacob looked around at the faces of his companions, exhausted, battered, but alive. Elena met his gaze and gave a small, tired smile. We made it through. For now. But deep down, Jacob knew this was only the beginning. The world outside was changing, growing darker and more dangerous. And if they were going to survive, they would have to adapt. Together. As the camp settled into uneasy rest, whispers of new threats began to circulate. Strange behaviors among the undead, sightings of shadowy figures lurking just beyond the perimeter. The survivors had learned to expect the unexpected, but this was something different. Jacob stared into the distance, determination hardening his features. The end had come, but so had hope. And as long as hope remained, there was a chance to fight back. The morning after the brutal night felt surreal. The camp was quiet, but the scars of battle were visible everywhere, broken fences, scattered weapons, and exhausted faces. The survivors moved slowly, some limping, others nursing bruises and scrapes. The victory was bittersweet. Jacob stood near the gate, scanning the perimeter. His mind churned with questions. The strange behavior of the large zombie and the sudden, intense attack felt orchestrated, as if something or someone was guiding the dead. But who, or what? Elena approached, her expression troubled. I heard some of the patrols spotted something unusual out there. Not zombies, but something else. Jacob raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Elena glanced around cautiously before lowering her voice. Some kind of humans, or at least, they looked human. They weren't attacking us, but they weren't friendly either. They watched from the shadows, staying just out of sight. The idea sent a chill down Jacob's spine. In a world overrun by the undead, humans could be just as dangerous, if not more. Captain Reed called a meeting at the center of the camp. The survivors gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. "We're not just fighting the dead anymore," Reed began, his voice steady but grave. "There are others out there. People who want something from us. We don't know their intentions yet, but we need to be cautious." Jacob exchanged looks with Elena and Marcus. This new threat added a layer of uncertainty that made survival even harder. After the meeting, Jacob, Elena, Marcus, Jenna, and David decided to investigate. If there were other humans lurking nearby, they had to find out who they were, and whether they were friend or foe. They moved out just before dusk, sticking to the shadows, following reports from the patrols. The world outside the walls was eerily silent now, save for the distant groans of the undead. Hours passed as they tracked footprints in broken branches, signs of recent movement. Finally, they reached an abandoned factory on the edge of town, a place that had once buzzed with life but was now a crumbling skeleton of rust and decay. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of oil. The group moved cautiously through the dark corridors, senses alert. Suddenly, a faint whisper echoed from a side room. Jacob signaled for silence. Elena crept forward, peering inside. Two figures huddled in the shadows, humans, armed but wary. One noticed Elena and raised a hand. "Wait. We don't want trouble." Jacob stepped into the light, hands raised. "Neither do we." "Who are you?" The taller figure, a woman with tired eyes, spoke first. "We're survivors, like you. We've been watching your camp for weeks." "Why?" Marcus asked, suspicious. "We thought you might be hostile. But you fought well last night. We wanted to see if you're worth trusting." Jacob studied them carefully. "Trust is hard to come by these days." "We know," the woman said. "But there's something bigger going on. The zombies, they're changing. Becoming smarter, more organized. It's like they're learning." Elena frowned. "That matches what we saw with the large one." The man beside the woman added, "We believe there's a source, some kind of infection evolving. It's spreading, and if we don't stop it, the world as we know it will be gone." Jacob's heart raced. This was worse than they thought. The new survivors introduced themselves as Maya and Eli. They shared what little information they had gathered, about experiments gone wrong, secret labs, and hidden agendas that might have unleashed the virus. It was a glimpse into a nightmare they hadn't fully understood until now. The groups agreed to share resources and information. Alone, neither side stood much chance. Together, they might survive, and maybe even fight back. As night fell, the combined survivors set up camp within the factory's remains. It wasn't safe, but it offered shelter and a new base for planning. Jacob sat with Elena, the weight of their discoveries settling in. "This changes everything," he said quietly. Elena nodded. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the future." Outside, the undead shuffled closer, their groans a constant reminder of the battle ahead. But inside, hope flickered stronger than ever. Because sometimes, the greatest strength came from unity, and the will to keep fighting, no matter how dark the world grew. The dawn light filtered weakly through the broken windows of the abandoned factory. The combined group of survivors stirred, uneasy but alive. The uneasy alliance between Jacob's camp and Maya and Eli's group felt fragile, like walking a tightrope stretched over a pit of uncertainty. Jacob rose early, pacing the cracked floor. His mind raced with questions about the evolving undead and the secrets Maya and Eli had revealed. If the virus was mutating, becoming smarter and more dangerous, their fight was far from over, it was only beginning. Elena joined him silently, sensing his unrest. "We need a plan," she said. "We can't just defend and react. We have to strike back." Jacob nodded. "But how? We don't know where the infection is spreading from. Or if there's a way to stop it." Maya approached, overhearing the conversation. "There might be a lead," she said quietly. "We found an old research facility a few miles from here. It's heavily guarded by zombies, but if the virus originated there, we might find answers, or even a cure. Eli added, it won't be easy. The undead near that site are different, faster, more aggressive. We lost some of our people trying to get close. Jacob's jaw tightened. Then we have to be better prepared. We can't afford mistakes. The group spent the morning planning. Supplies were checked and weapons distributed. Volunteers were chosen for the mission to scout the research facility. Jacob, Elena, Marcus, Maya, and Eli formed the core team. Their mission was clear: investigate the facility, retrieve any information, and assess the risks. As they moved out, the camp fell into a tense quiet, prayers whispered for the team's safe return. The journey through the wasteland was treacherous. Every shadow held potential danger, every sound a possible threat. Hours passed under a pale sky, the ruined landscape stretching endlessly around them. Suddenly, the eerie silence shattered, groans and snarls erupted from the nearby woods. A pack of faster, more coordinated zombies emerged, eyes glowing with unnatural intensity. The team braced for combat, weapons drawn and hearts pounding. The creatures attacked with brutal force, moving in calculated swarms that tested the survivors' skills and nerve. Jacob and Marcus took point, fending off the first wave with spears and rifles. Elena covered the flanks, her agility a crucial advantage in close quarters. Maya and Eli worked to secure the perimeter, making sure no one was flanked or overwhelmed. Despite their careful preparation, the fight was vicious and exhausting. The aggressive zombies adapted quickly, forcing the team to improvise traps and change tactics on the fly. Jacob felt a sharp pain in his side, a bite grazed through his jacket, narrowly missing his flesh. "Keep moving," he shouted, adrenaline surging. After a brutal skirmish, the team managed to repel the attackers, but not without cost. Marcus had taken a hit to his arm, bleeding but alive. Breathing heavily, the team pressed onward, finally reaching the towering gates of the research facility. The building loomed like a fortress, its cracked walls stained by years of neglect and decay. Jacob surveyed the entrance. "We'll have to find another way in." Eli nodded. "There's a maintenance tunnel on the east side. It's risky, but it might be our best shot." As they circled the perimeter, the distant moans of zombies grew louder, more were converging on their location. The survivors moved swiftly, slipping through the shadows toward the tunnel. Inside, the stale air was thick and oppressive. The faint hum of machinery echoed in the distance, a haunting reminder of the facility's former purpose. Deeper inside, the team discovered sealed labs and dusty archives filled with notes, samples, and equipment. Maya's hands trembled as she scanned documents describing early experiments on the virus, how scientists tried to control it but failed. Jacob found a map marked with several other sites of interest, potentially other research centers or quarantine zones. "This could be our way to understand the enemy," Jacob said, determination burning in his eyes. Suddenly, alarms blittered, shattering the silence. The facility's old security systems had triggered a lockdown. Red lights flashed as heavy doors began closing, trapping the team inside. "We need to move fast," Elena urged. The survivors split up, racing to collect what they could and find an exit. But the alarms also attracted the undead. The walls shook as zombies pounded on the barriers, their growls deafening. Jacob and his team fought their way through narrow corridors, desperate to escape. Just as a massive door slammed shut behind them, sealing the facility, the group burst through a side exit and into the cold night air. They didn't stop running until the glowing facility was far behind them. Safe for the moment, but burdened with new knowledge and heavier questions. As they made their way back to camp, Jacob knew one thing for certain. The fight was far from over. The enemy was evolving. And survival meant staying one step ahead. The return to camp was tense and quiet. The survivors, weary from their harrowing mission, knew the knowledge they carried was a double-edged sword. They now had clues to the virus's origins but also a stark reminder that the danger was growing smarter and deadlier. Jacob walked alongside Elena, the weight of responsibility heavy on both their shoulders. They could feel eyes watching, friend and foe alike. At the camp, the combined group greeted them with relief and exhaustion. But that relief was fleeting. Captain Reed's gaze was sharp, skeptical. "We lost people on this mission," Reed said grimly. "Did you find any answers worth risking lives for?" Jacob nodded slowly. "The virus is evolving, becoming more aggressive. We found evidence of experiments, people trying to weaponize it. And there are other facilities out there. We need to investigate them if we want to understand how to stop this." Reed frowned, his face hardening. "That's a lot of hope to pin on a few dusty labs." Before Jacob could respond, Maya stepped forward. "It's more than hope. It's a chance. But we need resources, and allies." That's when things took a darker turn. Over the following days, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Supplies were dwindling. Some survivors whispered about distrust and betrayal. One night, Jacob overheard hushed voices near the storage tents. "They're hiding food, weapons. Planning something," a voice said sharply. Jacob's heart pounded. Could the stress of survival be fracturing their fragile unity? The next morning, a shock rippled through the camp. A group of stolen supplies was discovered missing, along with a few weapons. Reed called for an emergency meeting. "We have a traitor among us," he declared. "Someone who would jeopardize all our lives for selfish reasons." Jacob felt eyes turn toward Maya and Eli's group, outsiders in many ways. But Maya shook her head fiercely. "We've lost enough already. We stand with you." Elena stepped forward. "We can't afford division. We need to find the real culprit." Jacob agreed. "I'll lead a small team to track the stolen supplies and uncover the truth." The hunt began at dawn. Jacob, Marcus, and a few trusted survivors followed faint tracks leading away from camp. The trail twisted through dense woods and over broken terrain, growing colder as they went. Then they stumbled upon a small, hidden camp, abandoned, but recently used. Signs of a struggle were evident: discarded weapons, torn clothing. Suddenly, a figure burst from the underbrush, a wild-eyed man with a rifle. "Stop!" he shouted, desperate. Jacob raised his hands. "We're not here to fight. We want answers." The man, trembling, lowered his weapon slightly. "I didn't want to steal. I just needed to survive." He confessed that a small faction within the camp had grown desperate, plotting to seize control and hoard supplies. Jacob's blood ran cold. The real danger wasn't just the undead, it was what fear and desperation did to people. The group returned to camp with heavy hearts and urgent warnings. That night, a confrontation erupted. Survivors accused each other, old grievances boiled to the surface. Jacob stood in the center, trying to mediate, to remind them what was at stake. "We can't let fear tear us apart," he pleaded. "Our strength is in unity." Slowly, voices softened. Plans were made to increase security and share resources more fairly. But the trust had been damaged. Jacob realized this battle was just as important as any fight against the undead. Because in a world overrun by monsters, sometimes the greatest threat came from within. As dawn broke, Jacob looked out over the camp, resolve hardening in his chest. The virus was evolving, the undead were getting smarter, and humans were fighting to hold on to their humanity. The path ahead was uncertain and dangerous. But one thing was clear. They had to survive. Not just for themselves, but for the hope of a future worth fighting for. The fragile peace in the camp was shattered just as the survivors began to rebuild trust. That morning, a distant, guttural howl echoed across the wasteland, chilling every soul awake. The undead were approaching, more numerous, more relentless than ever. Jacob's instincts screamed, this was no ordinary horde. Something was driving them faster, more aggressively, like a storm gathering strength. He rallied the survivors immediately. "Get weapons ready. Barricades reinforced. We hold this ground at all costs." Elena distributed ammunition, while Maya and Eli coordinated with the others to strengthen their defenses. Marcus checked the perimeter for weak spots, his eyes scanning the horizon with sharp focus. Hours passed with an eerie silence, tension thick as fog. Then came the first wave, a crashing tide of undead bursting from the tree line. The battle erupted in chaos. Groans and screams mixed with gunfire and the clang of makeshift weapons. Jacob fought fiercely at the front lines, wielding his spear like an extension of his own will. Every swing, every shot mattered. But these zombies were different, faster, smarter. They flanked the survivors, adapted to their defenses. Elena was nearly overwhelmed but managed to slip away into the shadows, her heart pounding. Inside the camp, chaos reigned as people scrambled to repel the swarm. Suddenly, from the back of the horde emerged something horrifying, a massive undead creature, towering and grotesque, its eyes burning with unnatural fire. The camp fell silent for a moment, stunned by the monstrous apparition. Jacob's voice cut through the shock. "We take it down, or we all die." The survivors united, focusing fire on the beast. Bullets pinged off its thick, rotting flesh. Maya shouted, "Aim for the head." "That's the only way." The creature charged, knocking over barricades, crushing anyone in its path. Marcus dove to protect a fallen survivor, barely escaping a crushing blow. Jacob leaped onto the beast's back, stabbing his spear deep into its skull. The creature howled in rage, thrashing wildly. With a final, desperate thrust, Jacob drove the spear through the creature's brain. It collapsed, lifeless. The victory was hard-won, but the survivors knew this was just the beginning. As the last zombies fell, Jacob spotted movement near the woods, another group of humans watching silently. Elena approached cautiously, heart racing. "Who are they?" A woman stepped forward, her eyes sharp and wary. "We're survivors, like you. But we don't trust easily." Jacob nodded, understanding the caution. "Neither do we. But maybe together, we have a chance." The stranger hesitated, then said, "We've been tracking that creature. It's not natural, it's been created. Engineered." Maya frowned. "By who?" The woman looked around cautiously. "There's a faction still working on the virus, a group called the Reclaimers. They want to control the outbreak, using it as a weapon." Jacob felt a cold dread. The war wasn't just against the undead, it was against other humans willing to sacrifice everything for power. "We have to find them," Jacob said firmly. "Stop them before it's too late." The new group offered supplies and reinforcements. Together, they planned a mission to strike at the heart of the Reclaimers' operation. But Jacob knew the risks were higher than ever. Betrayal, death, and worse awaited. That night, as the camp settled, Jacob sat beside Elena, the weight of their fight pressing down. "We're running out of time," he said quietly. Elena reached out, gripping his hand. "Then we fight harder." The fires burned low, shadows dancing. Outside, the undead were silent, for now. But the real reckoning was coming. And when it did, it would test everything they had left. This 795-word installment builds intense action, introduces a terrifying new enemy, and deepens the story with new alliances and enemies. Ready for Part 8 whenever you want. Part 8, Dawn of a New Hope. The dawn was cold and unforgiving as Jacob and his allies prepared for the final mission. The Reclaimers' stronghold was rumored to be deep within the abandoned city ruins, a place where shadows held secrets darker than the undead themselves. Supplies were packed, weapons checked, and hearts steeled for what lay ahead. Elena stood beside Jacob, determination clear in her eyes. "We have to end this, for everyone's still alive." Maya tightened her grip on her rifle. No more running. No more hiding. With the new survivors from the other group, their numbers were stronger but the risks higher. The city was a maze of crumbling buildings, tight alleys, and hidden dangers. As they moved forward, silence enveloped them, a heavy, suffocating quiet that spoke of death lurking everywhere. Suddenly, the first alarm sounded. Spotlights cut through the morning fog, illuminating their position. The Reclaimers had been expecting them. The mission shifted instantly from stealth to survival. Gunfire erupted, echoing against shattered walls. Zombies drawn to the noise shuffled toward the chaos, while reclaimer guards opened fire from fortified positions. Jacob led the charge, rallying the group through narrow streets lined with wreckage. Elena covered their flank, picking off enemies with precise shots. They reached a heavily guarded compound, the heart of the reclaimers' operation. Inside, the air was thick with chemicals and the faint hum of machines. What they discovered was worse than anyone imagined: vats filled with a glowing green substance, experiments in progress to create new kinds of infected, deadlier and faster. Maya gasped, "They're trying to turn this apocalypse into a weapon." A sudden explosion rocked the building, throwing everyone off balance. The reclaimers had triggered a self-destruct sequence. Jacob shouted, "We need to get out, now!" As they fled through collapsing corridors, hordes of zombies began pouring in, attracted by the destruction. Elena tripped but was caught by Marcus. "We're not leaving anyone behind." The group fought desperately, inching toward the exit as debris fell and flames spread. Outside, the survivors raced through burning streets, pursued by undead and reclaimer mercenaries alike. At the edge of the city, Jacob saw a helicopter waiting, an extraction team sent by distant allies who still believed in rebuilding. They sprinted for the landing zone, with zombies closing in. Just as the helicopter blades whipped the air, Jacob turned to face the horde one last time. "Go!" he yelled. Elena grabbed his arm, but Jacob shook his head. "I'm not done yet." Using every ounce of strength, Jacob held off the advancing undead, buying precious seconds for the others. The helicopter lifted off, carrying the survivors to safety. From above, Jacob watched the city burn, the heart of darkness slowly consumed by fire. He knew their fight was far from over. But as the sun rose higher, bathing the wasteland in light, a fragile hope bloomed. Humanity was battered, broken, but still alive. And as long as that spark remained, so did the chance to rebuild. To fight. To survive. Together. This concludes the full story arc with a strong, hopeful ending that balances intense action and emotional depth, perfect for keeping your audience hooked and ensuring a monetization-friendly narrative. Let me know if you want me to help with anything else.